Hey guys, and welcome back to my Friday video. Today we will be doing what if AdizzPro's Norway from his Wixo series appeared in the modern world. So, not only does this Norway have Germany, Denmark, most of Norway, most of Sweden, but it also has their occupation zone down here. Thanks to myself for making this map, because I'm almighty. And yeah, thanks to Wikipedia for this world map. And so obviously NATO can't exist, or else this video would just be Norway just sitting around and then eventually joining NATO at some point. And that wouldn't be very fun. So NATO doesn't exist. So the first thing that this Norway will do is, well, attack the remainder of Sweden and Norway. Not that they could do much on their own anyway, because they're dead pieces of land. So Norway will invade, also own part of Finland, forgot to mention, but they will invade and annex that area of land. Oh, my back is really itchy. And will full annex both Sweden as and Norway, probably because they want to form an empire, and also, well, they already kind of have an empire, and also because puppet states there wouldn't really be able to work because it's such a tiny area that doesn't have a lot of good land. So yeah, the next thing that they're going to want to do is actually not with the main part of Norway. Well, not with the main part of Norway, but actually down here in the Middle East, as they want water access for their thing, so they'll attack Syria, who is in a civil war currently, I think. So Assad got out of Syria right now, but there's still Rojava, which I will be representing on this map up here. So yeah. So because not the Norwegians don't want to have to keep sending air aid to this and not land aid. And Syria and Iraq had recently cut off supply routes through Syria and Iraq, so they decided to attack Syria. So they quickly go in and take over some border Syrian regions. They completely wipe out the Rojava group and continue going into Syria. They go down and take Damascus, which ultimately leads to the capitulation of Syria. And in the peace treaty, they will be expanding their group, their occupation zone slash puppet state into these lands, taking them over. And May will be making two new puppet states, Damascus and Rojava, that they plan to expand in the near future. So with Middle East taken care of, they can focus up back in Europe, where they will be attacking the Finns. Because they already own part of Finland, and they want the full control over the Baltic Sea. And the next country on that list to achieve that would be Finland. So they go into Finland. Now, Finland wouldn't have been that weakened by their territorial loss. I'm not sure if they even would have been at all weakened. So this would, however, Norway would still be initially stronger, going down the coast and taking Helsinki, the capital of Finland, which would cause Finland to lose a lot of land and capitulate. And in the peace treaty, full annexation. Now, Russia doesn't like the expansion of this country that happens to exist right on its borders, and so they will be making a anti. It's also will deleting all alliances from the world, so CSTO also doesn't exist now. So they will be making an anti-Norway alliance. Now, the problem with this alliance is that it doesn't have a lot of. Most of the countries around it don't like its founder, so it'll be hard to get new members. However, some countries do join, and that is Belarus, Serbia, and after some government toppling, Moldova. Kazakhstan joins, and finally, Armenia will be granted observer state status. They said they didn't want to join fully yet, as Norway didn't really directly um threaten them yet. However, they did state that any further military action in the Middle East would cause them to fully join the war. Well, not the war, the alliance. Over in Europe, the Western Europeans will form an alliance of their own. This initially includes Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, and Andorra, the Vatican, and San Marino. And that is what it will remain as for now, as no other countries really have an interest in joining as of now, though Germany is considering it, and eventually they are granted observer state status. Don't join yet, though. And other observers include the Benelux. Poland and the Baltics will form an anti-Norwegian coalition. And so Norway doesn't really have anywhere to go unless they want to face these coalitions. They invade Iceland. I'm not even going to do that because that's just them. They also take the Faroe Islands because they can't last. And Canada seizes Greenland as it doesn't have a ruler anymore, and they kind of wanted independence, but that's too late for that. The Norwegians then decide to go after the weakest coalition against them, the Polish coalition, the Polish Baltic coalition, deeming it probably easy to defeat, and I'm gonna probably say that they're right. If they'd gotten more members like Ukraine, Czechoslovakia in the future, it might have been harder to beat, but they weren't able to, as this was kind of all of a sudden. After the fall of Latvia, Poland and Lithuania surrender, and Lithuania severely weakened because of the loss of their coast, but that was fun, mandatory for the Norwegians if peace was wanted, and so it had to happen. So now with almost total Norwegian control over Baltics, these are the borders. Poland and Lithuania will remain in their Eastern coalition, and they will be gaining more members. Ukraine, like I mentioned, joins, Romania joins, Hungary joins, and Slovakia joins. However, all other nations hold off from doing it for now. Um, Over in the Middle East, the Arab nations form a anti um Norwegian, also anti-Israeli pact that, yeah, um let me just color this in. And also the Israelis and the Americans making alliance. I'm not going to color in all of America because they're not really going to be involved in this because Israel's not going to get attacked. Spoiler, but yeah. Anyway, so now they attack Turkey. As Turkey doesn't really have any friends in this region, they just go, well, not go, but decide to go right in. Just kidding, they're not going to be taking that much land. And take a good chunk of Turkish land right away. But this causes Armenia to join the Russian Pact. Georgia and Azerbaijan will join the Polish one. Bulgaria will join the Polish one. Greece will join the Russian one, actually. And Iran will also join the Russian one. They will pull out in Turkey, going up and taking Istanbul and the capital Ankara, which causes the Turks to capitulate. Which causes their Rojava slash now Kurdistan puppet to expand, plus the formation of a new Turkish puppet. Now, the reason they're dividing these all up into separate puppets and not just having them all under one puppet is because they don't want their puppets to get too powerful and then betray them and take over their land. So also remember this one used to be the old empire. Even though that doesn't exist in this timeline because it's just Norway got teleported. But that's what that is in the actual Wixo series. So some Wixo knowledge. And the Damascus puppet won't expand at all. Yeah. But now Norway's completely blocked from expanding without going into any coalitions. And then they realize, wait, in the West, an observer state doesn't have the protection thing. But then all the observer states in that join. The rest of these also join that, not Switzerland. Sorry, Switzerland. Even Britain and Ireland decide to join, officially blocking them from expanding. And so what will they do but attack the poles? Would actually be easier to just. However, seeing that this is the opportunity to stop the Norwegians, Russia and the Russian alliance and the European alliance begin to cook up plans to get involved on the side of the Polish. However, none are activated quite yet. As the Norwegians pour into. Sorry, my throat is a little dry, so I might sound a little weird. While they continue to pour into Poland, taking Warsaw, going into Slovakia and taking Bratislava, taking Budapest, and then the Russians decide it's the time to strike. The Europeans do as well. Now, Finland, they weren't expecting war with Russia. However, they were kind of preparing for a war with Europe. So they're kind of prepared for this and push into Germany, taking Berlin. They meet up with their Polish front and quickly do that. Also, taking the capitals of Czechia and Austria. Their forces pour into and take Kaliningrad, as well as advancing further on the Polish front line and entering Belarus and Ukraine, taking Minsk. However, they also take St. Petersburg. However, their territory in the Baltics is getting attacked by Russian forces, with Tallinn falling over to the Russians and naval forces landing here and taking Riga, uniting the northern Baltics under the Russian military. Down here, the um the Russian and Polish alliances begin pushing up against them. We're taking Vilnius. However, Norwegian troops pour into not Venice, Austria and Hungary, capitulating Hungary and Slovakia, as well as taking majority of Austria, and mainly it's now Germany, protecting Austria as their troops marched in there, Italy a little bit too. However, Trieste got taken by the um Norwegians, so they're dealing with their own problems as well. The Baltics, which are not the Baltics, the Balkans, which aren't really doing well in the real world, are kind of easily rolled over until you get to the more stabler countries like Greece, Bulgaria, and Romania. Well, I wouldn't say that Greece is really stable though with all their economic problems, but it's fine. They go and take Varna and Bucharest, and it seems that the war will be lost by the Blues for a second because of the massive push until the not the Asian, well, I guess it is kind of Asian, but the Middle Eastern Alliance joins in on the war. However, um, them push into Iraq. Baghdad was already under their control, so they don't take that, but they take over Lebanon and, oh, not the West. They take over Lebanon as well as the West Bank. However, they can't really get to Egypt quite yet. They push up into Georgia, but the Caucasian mountains are too hard of a barrier, and also these mountains in Iran are too hard for them to pass. So they mainly go down here, taking Kuwait. However, these military operations in the Middle East are distracting them from up here, allowing for the Russia's alliance, Poland's alliance, and the Europeans' alliance to make two spearheads, cutting the fronts in half, which ultimately leads to the freeing of the Balkans. Also, sorry, Kosovo isn't on this map. I usually like ones with Kosovo, but this one didn't have it. Until it's just the parts that are still held up by the Middle Easterners. However, the Europeans, not Europeaners, make a landing in Syria, oh wait, they don't take over Lebanon. They take back Lebanon and continue pushing into former Turkey, retaking Ankara and taking Istanbul. They continue pushing until the Turkish, well, former Turkish, are completely capitulated. Just the Kurdistan's original puppet state and the Syria one, which never got to expand, still exist. The Blues begin pushing back the Norwegians as the Norwegians retreat to try to hold their puppet territory. The Blues overwhelm the Norwegians there. Finally, the Norwegians no longer officially have a presence in the Middle East, and now the Blue begins pushing on the Norwegians. They go up and retake Berlin and get back on the coast, pushing them back up to Denmark and kicking them out of this region, fully liberating the Baltics, retaking St. Petersburg, kicking them out of northern Germany, seizing the Faroe Islands, taking former Germany to German territory, freeing Iceland, invading into Finland and freeing Helsinki, taking all of Denmark, landing in Sweden and taking Malmo, going up and around there, taking Stockholm, taking Oslo, cutting off the Finnish and taking all of that, uniting their fronts, kicking out all the populated areas of Sweden and Norway, and finally capitulating the Norwegians. And I'll pause this for a sec while I get the peace treaty up. Here you have it, the peace treaty. It looks so different from our modern world map. Like, I can't even tell that this used to be the Europe that we know today. I mean, come on, people. Well, anyway, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. I'm trying to get 100 by the end of 2025. That is our goal currently. And hope you enjoy. I'll see you on Monday's video or Saturday's video if you also watch my short gaming video. Link in the description. And bye.